We're gonna need bottom half. The guy's gonna start with top head and arm. Good. Can you rotate it so you can see? Well, actually, they can walk around if they want to. So he's gonna have top head and arm just like so. From here, knee on the mat. Yep, Ruben's gonna have a knee on the mat, and if you notice, his right knee in this case is over my far glute. Okay, that's good knee position. Because if his knee's closer to my to the crack of my butt, it's easier for me to knee lever him. Okay. So again, when his knee's on my far glute, it's a lot harder for me to knee lever him. If his knee's in the middle of my glute, it's gonna be easier for me to knee lever him. Okay. So this guy's a knowledgeable opponent, and he knows that if he positions his knee on the outside of my glute, then it's gonna be hard for me to knee lever him. Okay. From here, I'm gonna take my leg. I'm gonna start to face that knee that I want to attack. Okay. So I start to face the knee I want to attack. I take my hamstring and I start to extend it away from me. What that's going to do is it's going to start to take his knee from that wide position to a very narrow position, as you can see. From here I go foot over foot, and now I start to point my knee towards that direction, and that's going to start to knee lever him over. Okay. From here, in order to keep his base, Ruben's going to unlock his hands and base out. Okay. So once again, knee's going to be out in a wide position. I take my hamstring and I make contact with the top of his leg. I extend my leg through. I go foot over foot. From here, whether or not you post on the armpit is up to you. I come through, I knee lever, my elbow comes into inside position. As Ruben goes to regain his position, I use my elbow to throw his body weight over me. And from here, voila, what do we have? We have an underhook, okay? Once again, top, head, and arm. I shift, I use my hamstring to get his knee out and away. From here, I go foot over foot on the mat. From here, point my knees out to my left, take your elbow inside. As he starts to come through for the head and arm, I take my elbow and I use it on his armpit to get him up and over me. From here, I take my my left hand and I swing through for an underhook. All right, just drill that first. 1, 2, 3. We're looking at coming up into a single leg situation. So we're gonna hit that same technique we just hit. He goes over, we come under, and now we're in a tight waist situation. Okay. Now, from here, anytime you're interested in coming up to a single leg, it's always, I won't say always, but typically more beneficial to work under your opponent's glute, not above the glutes on the waist, okay? So from here, what we're going to do is I'm going to use my knees in unison with each other, and I'm going to bring everything into my chest, including my right elbow. So if he's trying to cross-face me here, yep, it's going to help me off-balance him overhead. So as he comes over, I off-balance overhead, and that's going to allow me to shift my arm under his glute. As you guys can see, it's now under his glute, all right? From here, now we have to switch from a right leg dominant half guard to a left leg dominant half guard, okay? It's going to be hard to come up for single legs if I leave my right foot in this case, so I'm going to shift it to my left. Once I shift it to my left, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scissor my legs out. Now, as you can see, I still have a Kosoto hook over his leg, okay? But now, because I scissored my legs out, I'm starting to gain an ability to build my base, okay? My right elbow is going to come to my hip. My forehead's going to come to the mat. I'm going to build, knee on the mat, hand on the mat, just like so. And I'm going to base out in this position here, okay? What you want to try to avoid is coming up to the waist and trying to hug your opponent before time. First, let's think about establishing our base. You want to sit low and heavy here. Ruben will tell you when I sit low and heavy with heavy shoulder pressure over his hip flexor here, it feels like he's carrying my weight in this situation. And his whizzer is going to glue him to me, okay? So the stronger his whizzer is, the more effective this technique will be, all right? Once we get to this position here, there's a variety of different offenses that we can start to incorporate from here. All right, but this is the first technique I want you guys to try. So once again, we'll be in a half guard situation with a tight waist. From here, I have to off balance him overhead. So I use my knees and my elbow to get that overhead off balance, and now I come under the glute. From here, I shift, 1, 2, scissor out. As he's trying to fight me, I get everything down to the mat, okay? And I'm basing out heavy here. Left shoulder is making good contact with your opponent's hip flexor here. He should feel like the whizzer is super heavy to hold on to. It feels heavy? Yeah, okay? He shouldn't be in this type of situation. Yeah, where now his whizzer is very strong, okay? I want to work below the glute, just like so, all right? All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Next one, we're going to look at something that arguably is probably not well developed in jiu-jitsu, but I believe it will be in the future once people start to develop more of their wrestling prowess, and that's shelving the leg. Okay, so we're going to be in our single leg situation, just as I had stated. We're scoring our underhook. Once we score on our underhook, we shift our opponent forward and we come onto the leg. I lower leg shift, scissor my legs out, and I come up into a single leg situation where I'm punching my hand through down to the mat. Ruben asked me, like, why am I choosing to punch my hand down to the mat? The reason is because I'm emphasizing attacking the inside of my opponent's legs. Ironically enough, typically, in this specific situation that we're in here, the more I try to hold onto the leg itself, the less pressure I actually create on it, okay? So I'm relying more on just basically like my bicep muscle and my body itself to attach myself to my opponent. Whereas when I glue my hand to the mat, I'm relying more on my body weight and gravity is doing the work of attaching myself to him. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you? Okay. Now from here, we're going to look at starting to go backside into a shelf. From here, once we're in this situation, I'm going to take a leg and I'm going to start to drive up. Now I've established a drive leg. Once I start to establish a drive leg, you guys can see on my left hand. From here, I'm going to take my left hand and I'm going to drop my elbow to it. And for Ruben, things are going to go from bad to worse as I drop my elbow inside. When I drop my elbow inside, even if they do still have a whizzer, it's going to be a very, very weak whizzer. It's not uncommon for guys to start avoiding mission here once they start to feel it. But you guys can also play around with having a shallow whizzer. That's fine. It's a matter of preference, okay? From here, the point is you want to drop your elbow down to the mat. The reason being, once you drop your elbow down to the mat, it's going to be really, really hard for this guy to start turning and facing me, okay? From here, once we drop the elbow to the mat, I take my left knee and I blade it. You guys can see I'm still driving into Ruben hard, okay? I take my right hand, I scoop it, and I shelf his leg on my right hip, okay? Now, once I shelf his leg on my right hip, I'm going to hit a pass off here, where my hand that's shelving is going to come to the knee, and now I'm going to get off both knees, and I'm driving into Ruben. If I asked, I'm not going to ask him to do it, but if I asked Ruben right now to pick his hands off the mat, he would face plant. Why? Because I'm driving forward into him hard, okay? And this is arguably I'm going to ease pressure off of him. This is arguably a skill that jiu-jitsu people aren't very good at, okay? We're so eager to get to people's backs that we forget to capitalize on a lot of the pressure we can create in situations like this, okay? But watch. So, Ruben, take your hands off the mat. Good. No, sorry, just one hand off the mat. Good. You guys can see there's no pressure, okay? The way you want to play this situation is pressure forward, okay? So now you start to flatten your opponent out, okay? Once you flatten them out, I'm going to come through. I'm going to start to cover the waist. From this situation, I cover the waist. Notice, this is in contrast to situations where I prematurely come up to the waist. And now my opponent still has good structure and therefore good ability to counter. As opposed to situations where, say for example with a leg shelf, I start to drive, reach for the far leg, I start to flatten them out. Once I flatten them out, now I'm coming up and covering the waist like so. For him to fight up from this situation is going to be a lot harder, okay, and a lot more rigorous for him. Alright, so once again, going over a leg shelf, and for many of you here today, like, the leg shelf is probably going to feel pretty awkward. I'll admit, even for myself, this is something like Travis started to teach me probably like a good 2 years ago, and it wasn't really until like, I want to say the last 6 months where this technique started to click. So I'll say this much, if it doesn't feel natural today, it's okay. It's definitely something that takes work and time and effort to build into a skill, all right? So once again, we're in a half guard situation. I score an underhook. From here, once I score the underhook, I'm going to shift Ruben overhead. Get under his glute. Shift, 1, 2, I build. Hand down to the mat. I'm driving. Foot is driving up. I drop my elbow hard. I grab his knee. I use my knee to pass it off. Now I shelf. When I shelf, a lot of you guys might be doing this. This isn't what you want. I want to drive into this man. Okay, we're driving into him. I pass, pass, drive, drive, drive. He's flattened out. From here, we start to cover the waist from that flattened out position. Okay? And if you guys notice, like his foot is caught in my hip, that's his problem, not mine. Okay? It's a lot harder for him to recover from a situation like this where his foot's caught in my hip than it is for me to attack him. Make sense? All right, on 3, 1, 2, 3.